are talking Behemoth. This one is directed by Peter Sverek. May have butchered that name. It sounds like a Polish name and I've probably butchered it, so apologies. Anyway, this one is a low-budget horror movie with a social political message. Now, what is the story, you might say? But what does Behemoth refer to? It actually refers to a large conglomerate-style company. That is the Behemoth. That is the Behemoth of this movie. Our main protagonist is this guy who used to work for this particular company. And, you know, for many years he used to be a company man, doing what the company asked of him, even if it was somewhat morally questionable at times. However, as it turns out, his young daughter seems to have gotten very ill, terminally ill in fact, and this guy feels like the company is actually directly responsible through its flagrant disregard for health and safety policies and kind of dumping of toxic chemicals, things like this. So now our main protagonist is this guy who is campaigning for this company to come clean about what they are doing and to face justice ultimately. However, at the time that he's doing this, he actually ends up neglecting his daughter who is in hospital and his long-suffering wife. He's joined by a couple of friends on a protest one day, but things take a little bit of a unexpected detour. They inadvertently end up kidnapping one of the heads of this company and kind of take him hostage. Now that might seem fairly kind of standard for a kind of, a thriller action movie, but this is actually a horror film and it has this supernatural undertone to it as well. So this company and people connected with it may well be in league with some type of demonic entities, is all I'm going to say. Or is it that our main character is actually suffering from mental delusions, because we learn that he has suffered from some type of mental illness. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. I found this movie pretty interesting because I feel it succeeds in some ways and fails in others, but that are very similar. So let me explain. What do I think works, first of all? Let me tackle maybe the narrative, the story elements of this film, first of all. One of the things I do think the story got right is interweaving a kind of fantasy horror movie, but with real life, climate change issues and things like this, political issues that are real in this world, and tries to have maybe not tackle them, but tickle them is maybe a better idea, but have a little bit of commentary about it and how things like ecological disasters are happening right under our noses and how it's kind of going unchecked and things like this. So the movie does try and have a message, of trying to maybe open people's eyes to certain kind of situations, all while wrapped in this kind of supernatural packaging. So I did admire trying to kind of have this sort of social political message in with the actual story and it not become too heavy-handed and preachy. I think the movie straddled a fine line with that. So those kind of story elements, I think, were quite well thought out, and tying it in to what may or may not be kind of supernatural elements, I think the idea there was done quite well. However, sticking with story elements, there are things here that just don't seem really that plausible. Mainly the interactions between our characters and what actually happens. How these characters end up with this person hostage, things like this. Some of the kind of the actions that kind of people take within this movie, or actions that they don't take. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it just seems like dumb in some instances. So we have this kind of mix of story elements that I think seem quite well thought out, mixed in with story elements that's and kind of like very stupid plot points within the film. So the overall message, I feel, is like the synopsis is probably quite good, but the minutiae of the detail about what actually happens, the meat and bones of the plot, seems ridiculous at times. And things are poorly staged. For example, we see one of our characters sees like a monster and this is the first time he's seen anything supernatural, and he just seems to walk slightly kind of like fast. That's kind of what he does when he sees this huge demonic creature kind of like for the first time. Things like this. So it's just like very, very silly, small plot details within this framework, which does actually have quite an interesting narrative. Things like that. So again, I'm going to take a similar kind of approach here to the special effects. There is a lot of CGI effects. Now, for a low-budget movie, I was surprised how many effect shots we actually got. And, you know, I'll be honest, I can be a little forgiving with low-budget kind of CGI. And I do think there is some reasonable CGI here. And we get some interesting designs and some quite imaginative moments within the movie that involve kind of CGI. But then at the same time, I think they go too far with the CGI. There's scenes here where we simply didn't need CGI. For example, we see a scene where a kind of a body is hit by a car and it's flying across the road, CGI. We see a bullet dropping on the floor, CGI. An insect crawling over someone's skin, CGI. This would have been easy to do in practical terms. I don't know why it seems like to me that someone's learned After Effects and kind of gone crazy with it a little bit. And I think a little bit more restraint with the CGI would have benefited the movie. Maybe have less effect shots, and maybe the effect shots that we do have maybe improve just a tad. I don't think the effects themselves were too bad for a low budget film. They look like CGI effects. Do not get me wrong. We are not talking Jurassic Park style CGI here, people. But I can forgive it because trust me, I've seen a hell of a lot worse CGI than this. Although how they interact with the real world around them is a little less convincing. You know, I won't lie to you about that. But nonetheless, it just seems that they've got a little bit unnecessarily overboard with kind of some of the CGI effects. You know, CGI blood, things like this. Some of the stuff which could have been done pretty damn easily with kind of practical effects. So we have elements here that I think work well and don't work within the kind of the same, you know, the same kind of, you know, sections of the film. But here's one thing I think doesn't work without really any good points. The acting. You know, the acting here is fairly weak, particularly from the main players, is all I'll say. The acting from the guy who is kidnapped and our main kind of character is unfortunately very unconvincing. Our two friends, a little bit less so, but still not brilliant. But none of the acting here is really that great, and at times it's distractingly awkward. So sadly, the acting, I think, does detract a lot from this movie. And in actual fact, it's so bad at times, you cannot take the film seriously because the acting, and I've got to be honest, I think it's partially the direction. As I've mentioned, there was that scene where this character sees this monster and he kind of just goes, oh my God, and kind of like walks a little bit. And this is the first time you've ever seen like a creature and stuff like that. The acting is bad, yes, but also that should have been picked up by the director. So, you know, the quality of the kind of what we see on screen is a mix between some subpar acting and some subpar direction to the actors. So, you know, it comes across as a little bit crappy at kind of times. The end of the movie is interesting, but it's a little bit kind of like, you can see where it's kind of going. I feel this movie is somewhat kind of predictable. And they introduce this element where, you know, it could have been, you know, we don't know if what we're seeing is real or, you know, there's actually kind of demonic stuff going on, or it could have been maybe something what this guy is having kind of mental issues. You know, the film introduces that element, but it kind of answers it pretty quickly. I'm not going to say what it is, but obviously you can probably guess. But it seems like pointless having to introduce this element of doubt. So, you know, we as the audience will know very quickly if this thing is in this guy's head or if it's real. And I think the movie sets up this, oh, he has mental problems. So we as an audience are meant to think, is what he's seeing real, or is it something that's actually happening? But it's answered pretty quick, and it seems like a pointless exercise in having to even ask that question. So how do I rate this film? I do find the kind of the overall plot, the basic bare bones plot, interesting. I quite like some of the designs of the CGI, and I think it's at an acceptable level for the most part, but it fails on a number of issues, and ultimately I feel comes across as a little bit dumb, a little bit kind of cliche, a little bit predictable, and sadly somewhat poorly acted. So I'll give this movie a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.